Today I will talk about confounding. It is part of my series of lectures on research methodology. This is my lecture outline. First I will give introduction. Then I will talk about terms which are similar to confounding variable. Then I will talk about how to identify the confounders. Then I will talk about how to control for confounding variables during design phase, followed by how to control for confounding during analysis phase. Then I'll talk briefly about residual confounding. Then I will provide you with a Python code for controlling of confounding. So a confounding factor is a factor that is related to both the exposure and the outcome variable, and that does not lie on the causal pathway between them. So it should not lie between this causal pathway from exposure to disease, and it is related to both exposure and disease. Confounding is a major concern in causal studies because it results in biased estimation of exposure effects. In the extreme, this can mean that a causal effect is suggested where none exists, or that a true effect is hidden, or it can even change the direction of the observed effect. The impact of error in confounder measurement is perhaps not as widely appreciated as it should be. Unlike selection or information bias, confounding is one type of bias that can be adjusted after data gathering using statistical models. If a variable is a confounder, then it will certainly cause a change in the relationship between exposure and the outcome. However, not every variable that causes a change in the relationship between exposure and outcome is a confounder. There are other similar variables. One of these is mediator, the other is collider. I will talk about mediators later in my present lecture. So negative and positive confounding. Confounding can bias the primary measure of association towards the null, causing an underestimate of association. So this is the underestimate of association, and this is known as negative confounding. Confounding can also bias the measure of association away from null, causing an overestimate of association. So in this case, there is overestimate of association, and this is known as positive confounding. Simpson paradox is also an example of confounding, where an association between two variables reverses or disappears when the data is grouped by a third variable known as confounding variable. In other words, Simpson paradox refers to the reversal of the direction of an association when data from several groups are combined to form a single group. So let us see an example. For example, a study comparing two medical treatments shows that one treatment is better overall. However, when analyzed by patient subgroups, for example by age or by severity, the other treatment appears to be better within each subgroup. So in this case, the confounding variable is a factor like the distribution of patient disease severity or age between two treatment groups. And if we subgroup on the basis of this confounding variable, one group might have disproportionately high number of sicker patients, making the overall outcome look worse for the group even if treatment itself is effective. So similar terms, confounding versus interaction. If there is substantial variation between the stratum-specific estimates of effect, this indicates the presence of interaction, also called effect modification, between the exposure of interest and the so-called confounding factor. Confounding by indication. Confounding by indication is a special type of confounding that can occur in observational pharmacoepidemiologic studies of the effect and side effect of drugs. This type of confounding arises from the fact that individuals who are prescribed a medication or who take a given medication are taking it for a reason, and they are inherently different from those who do not take the drug. So this is confounding by indication. Then effect modification or effect measure modification, this phenomena whereby the effect of one factor is modified or changed by another factor is known as effect modification. For example, the association between heavy smoking and lung cancer might have a risk ratio of 20 in general population, but the risk ratio of smoking and lung cancer might be 60 among shipyard workers who smoke heavily and used to install asbestos in ship as fireproofing. So this asbestos, exposure to asbestos variable affect the relationship between smoking and lung cancer. So this is the effect modification. Then reverse causation. A reverse causation research study investigates scenarios where the outcome is the cause and the suspected cause is the effect instead of the other way around. For example, studies showing that people who are obese are more likely to be in poor health, but it could also be that poor health causes obesity. So this is reverse causation. Another example is that studies where companies with high CEO compensation tend to have strong financial performance, suggesting high pay is a result of good performance, not the cause of it. So research must account for this bias to avoid drawing incorrect conclusions from correlational data. Mediators. So mediators are midway between the exposure and outcome. Controlling for a factor that is on the causal pathway lead to underestimation of the strength of effect of exposure on the outcome under study. So we should not control for this mediator, but we need to control it. So occasionally a variable that lies in the causal pathway may be adjusted for in the analysis if we want to assess whether the effect of exposure on the outcome in the study is entirely mediated through the intermediate variable or whether there may be other independent biological mechanisms. Now, we need to identify the confounders before we design the study. This is important. So how to identify for confounders? Confounder selection would typically rely on prior knowledge. This is important and possibly supported by directed acyclic graph or DAG. The analysis of study data itself will not indicate what is or is not a confounder. Identification of confounder should be done by taking into account findings from previous epidemiological studies and what is known about the possible etiologic mechanisms of the disease under study. Only a considerable knowledge of pathophysiologic mechanisms and potential causal pathways will assist an investigator to decide whether a variable satisfies the criteria for being a potential confounder or not. So a variable is a confounder if it satisfies one of the following conditions. It has been proven so in previous studies. So knowledge of previous studies is important. Adjusting for confounder produces more than a 10% change in the relationship between exposure and the outcome. It is associated with both exposure and outcome without being on the causal pathway between the two. So let us see. It should be associated with the exposure X. So if this is our regression equation, a statistically significant beta 1 coefficient reflects association between the confounder and exposure in this equation. So we have regressed the exposure with the confounder. It should be associated with outcome variable Y in the absence of exposure. So here in this regression equation where we regress the outcome variable with confounder as well as the exposure variable, and if beta 1 coefficient is significant, it means that C is a confounder. It should not be a consequence of exposure. In other words, it should not be on the causal pathway between exposure and outcome. In that case, it is known as mediator and not confounder. And the fourth point is it represents a common cause of both exposure and outcome. If the relationship between the exposure X and the outcome Y is confounded by C, then adjusting for C will alter the association between X and Y, and this alteration must be more than 10%. We measure the association between X and Y, that is exposure and outcome variable, with and without adjusting for confounding variable, and then we compare these measures, and we do this by regression analysis or stratified analysis. This I will talk about later in my present lecture. So if this is these are the equations when we regress outcome variable with the exposure variable with and without the confounding variable, there is signal of confounding by C if the coefficient beta, which represents the effect of X on Y, differ by more than 10% between these two models. So if this beta 1 differ by more than 10% between these two models, it is the evidence that C is a confounding variable. This is using regression analysis. And similarly, we can do using this stratified analysis, we can apply the 10% rule. And this is the formula where the relative risk crude minus relative risk adjusted divided by relative risk adjusted is more than 10%. I will talk about this adjusted measure in my present lecture later on. Then controlling for confounding during design phase. There are three options which we can do during design phase for control of confounding. So first one is random assignment. Random assignment is a process by which participants are assigned with the same chance to either receive or not a certain exposure. So this is the random assignment. We assign the participants in exposure and unexposed group. And this we do, for example, in randomized clinical trials or RCT. Randomizing the exposure adjusts the confounding by eliminating the influence of confounder on the probability of receiving the exposure. So this influence is aborted in this situation. Random assignment control for confounding due to both measurable and unmeasurable causes. It is especially useful when confounding variables are unknown or cannot be measured. It also controls for time-varying confounders, that is, when the exposure and the confounding variables are measured repeatedly in studies where participants are followed over time. So in most of the situations, the random assignment is helpful. Sometimes we cannot do random assignment due to either ethical reasons or practical reasons or financial reasons. Also, it is limited to interventional studies, that is, for example, randomized clinical trials. It is not always possible in observational studies. It may not be completely effective for small trials. Then restriction. Restriction refers to only including in the study participants of a certain confounder category, thereby eliminating its confounding effect. So if there are these three categories, for example, of the confounder variable, and if we restrict, for example, only the poor subjects in our study, then we are eliminating the effect of confounding variable. Unlike random assignment, restriction is easy to apply and also work for observational studies, because in observational studies we can select our individuals like that to follow. Then the drawback is that the biggest problem with restricting our study to one category of confounder is that the result will not generalize well to other categories of confounder variable. Restriction will limit the external validity of the study, especially in cases where we have more than one confounder to control for. It can only be used for known confounders and only when the status of potential subjects is known with respect to that variable. So this is the prerequisite actually. And residual confounding may occur if restriction is not narrow enough. Restriction limits the number of potential subjects and may limit sample size. If restriction is used, one cannot generalize the finding to those who are excluded. Restriction is particularly cumbersome if used to control for multiple confounding variables. The third option is matching. Matching works by distributing the confounding variable evenly between exposed and unexposed groups. The idea is to pair each exposed subject with an unexposed subject that shares the same characteristics regarding the variable. that we want to control for. For example, if we have two groups, one smoker and the other non-smoker, and we take the income group matching between the smoker group and non-smoker group, then we are using the matching option for confounding. It can only be used in case of known confounders. The more confounding variables we have to control for, the more difficult matching becomes, especially for continuous variables. The problem with matching on many characteristics is that a lot of participants will end up unmatched. This method can be used in both cohort studies and case control studies in order to enroll a reference group that has artificially been created to have the same distribution of a confounding factor as the index group. Matching is particularly useful when trying to control for complex or difficult to measure confounding variables because we need not measure, we just have to match. It may be difficult, expensive, and time consuming to find appropriate matches, so this is a drawback. Then controlling of confounding during analysis phase. So these are the options which we have for control of confounding during analysis phase. I'll talk about these one by one. In general, all methods are dependent on assumption of no unknown confounder, no unmeasured confounder, no residual confounding. So this should be actually there in case of the control of confounding during analysis phase. Poor measurement of confounders reduces the ability to control for their effect by statistical methods, and there will be, in such a scenario, residual confounding. These techniques can be applied only if data on potential confounding factors are available. So at the design phase, we should know which are the variables which are confounders, and the data, we should have the data of confounding variable also. Thus, potential confounding variables have to be identified at the design stage of the study to ensure that valid information on them is collected. So this is prerequisite. So first of all, I'll talk about stratification. Stratification control for confounding by estimating the relationship between exposure and outcome within different subsets of confounding variable and then pulling these estimates. So we divide our data into various subgroups depending on the confounding variable. We estimate the statistics and then we average the statistics. Objective of stratification is to fix the level of confounders and produce groups within which the confounder does not vary. Then evaluate the exposure outcome association within each stratum of the confounder. So within each stratum, the confounder cannot confound because it does not vary across the exposure outcome combination. So this I have taken from literature. The Mantel-Haenszel odds ratio denoted by this gives a weighted average of odds ratio in different strata. So let us say if we have two strata on the basis of confounder. So one is the never user of confounder variable, the other is ever user of confounder variable. So we have made two subgroups. We calculate odds ratio independently of these subgroups as well as we calculate an average weighted odds ratio using this formula. So this is for calculation of the 95% confidence interval of the adjusted odds ratio, and this is for chi-square test for the odds ratio. This is in case of cohort study where we calculate the risk ratio, and this is the formula for the adjusted risk ratio. This is for calculation of confidence interval of the risk ratio, and this is for calculation of chi-square test for risk ratio. This is another situation of a cohort study where we calculate the rate ratio. This is the formula for adjusted rate ratio. This is for confidence interval, and this is for chi-square test. So assumption in case of stratification, it is important to note that stratification assumes that each stratum is homogeneous in relation to confounding variable. This is important. The stratification method only works if the stratification is sufficiently fine to eliminate the relationship between disease and confounder in strata. If it is not, there will be a residual confounding. An underlying assumption in the calculation of a summary effect estimate, that is the adjusted odds ratio, risk ratio, or rate ratio, is that the true effect is the same across strata and that any departure from this uniform effect are assumed to be due to random sampling variation. If there is substantial variation between stratum-specific estimates of effect, this indicates the presence of interaction between the exposure of interest and the confounding factor. Stratification does not scale well since controlling for multiple confounders simultaneously will lead to complex calculations. It will lead to subgroups containing very few participants, and these will reflect the noise in the data more so than real effects. Then standardization. While stratification of confounders relies on information at the individual level in a study population, standardization involves the use of reference population obtained either from the data set or from an external source, such as data from larger geographical scale. Typically, disease or death rates are only standardized to age and perhaps to sex and race, even in large registry-based studies. If more factors are considered, then separate analysis must be undertaken for specific subgroup. There are two main approaches that handle confounding by standardization. One is direct, resulting in adjusted rate. The other is indirect standardization, resulting in standardized ratios. So this is an example of use of standardization for controlling of confounders. So if we have the two subgroups, that is physically active and sedentary individuals, then we can adjust the statistic, that is the coronary heart disease rate, on the basis of the standard population which we have taken of this physically active group. And we have applied the standard population here also. You can see in this we have weighted on the basis of the population of the physically active group. So this is how we calculate the adjusted risk ratio. Then regression. Adjusting for confounding using regression simply means to include the confounding variable in the model used to estimate the influence of the exposure and the outcome. So we simply need to add a variable, that is confounder, in our equation for regression, where the coefficient beta will reflect the effect of exposure on the outcome adjusted for the confounder. So this is beta 1, which will reflect the effect of exposure on the outcome adjusting for this confounder. Then the choice of type of regression model is on the basis whether our outcome variable is linear or dichotomous. Regression can easily control for multiple confounders simultaneously, as this simply means adding more variables to the model. A regression model operates under certain assumptions that must be respected. For example, a linear relationship between predictors and the outcome. The other assumptions include independence, normality, and equal variance. If in doubt, sensitivity analysis may be done. A number of automated procedures for selecting variables for regression models are included in most regression softwares. But it should be noted that automated selection procedures should not be relied on to make decisions about confounders, as they may result in inappropriate exclusion or inclusion in the model. If a variable is confounder, it ought to be controlled regardless of statistical significance. Factors may be omitted from multivariate model based on preliminary data-driven procedures such as these. And it is important to recognize that data-driven variable selection is not related to the presence of confounding factor in the data set. Modifications of the multivariate model have been developed to better comply with the underlying assumptions or to avoid discarding variables. These include transformations of variables, shrinkage of parameter estimates, random coefficient regression models, and also I will talk about semi-parametric regression. That is another thing which we can do in case of one or more assumptions which are not met. So this is about semi-parametric regression. It includes regression model that combines parametric, this is the parametric term, and this is the non-parametric term. Readers who are interested can go to this site on Wikipedia to start understanding about the semi-parametric regression. Then analysis of covariance. This is another tool for adjusting the confounder. The analysis of covariance is the type of ANOVA that is used to control potential confounding variable. It is a statistical linear model with a continuous outcome variable and two or more predictor variables where at least one is continuous and at least one is categorical. Analysis of covariance is a combination of ANOVA and linear regression. Analysis of covariance tests whether certain factors have an effect on the outcome variable after removing the variance for which quantitative covariates account. Now, let us talk about inverse probability weighting, propensity score, and SD propensity score method. Propensity score method, this model is used to give each person a propensity score which measures the propensity or probability to be exposed given their individual characteristics. Propensity score is the probability of an individual receiving a particular treatment given their observed baseline characteristics. It is calculated by modeling the treatment assignment as a function of covariates. The adjustment method can be based on regression or on stratification. So these are the 4 steps of propensity score method. The propensity score method cannot handle treatment defined as a continuous variable unless the continuous treatment variable is categorized. Disease risk score may be alternative to propensity score. Methods that are based on inverse probability weighting principle represent alternatives with a wide range of applications because inverse probability weighting may be generalized to a suite of different circumstances, also including dichotomous and non-dichotomous exposure. Inverse probability weighting is a technique that uses propensity scores to create balanced pseudopopulation by reweighting individuals based on the inverse probability of their treatment exposure. The core difference is that the inverse probability weighting is a method of analysis while the propensity score is a statistical tool used within this method of inverse probability weighting. Inverse probability weighting eliminates confounding by equalizing the frequency of the confounders between exposed and unexposed groups. Because we generate a pseudopopulation in this situation, what are the drawbacks? If some participants have very large weights, then there is a problem. In such a situation, we can exclude from the study participants with very high or very low weights. The another thing is time varying exposure and time-dependent confounding may also be dealt with by a method based on IPW in the form of marginal structural models or structural nested model based on G estimation. This is a newer technique that is high-dimensional propensity score method. It involves a series of steps, and these are the steps. Here, a large number of variables, often hundreds, are selected as a potential confounders. There is a little empirical evidence that high-density propensity score method is better at controlling for unmeasured confounding than other methods, and adding several hundred empirically identified factors as high-density propensity score setting may lead to comparable results to those could also be obtained from conventional propensity score methods. Propensity score method is more robust in situations with rare outcomes and common exposure than multivariable analysis. However, even in a large sample setting, we may face the challenge of rare exposure or rare treatment, and disease risk score method is more suitable under these circumstances. Then finally, instrument variable method. The instrument variable method estimates the unconfounded effect of the exposure on the outcome indirectly by using a variable, the instrument variable, that represents the exposure but not affected by confounder. An instrument variable satisfies these three properties. It causes exposure. It does not cause the outcome directly. It affects outcome only through exposure, and its association with outcome is unconfounded. So confounder have no effect on instrument variable. So this is the mathematics of the instrument variable method. Interested viewers can pause the video and study this. This is an example. So in order to see the effect of smoking during pregnancy and birth weight of baby, we can take cigarette tax as an instrument variable because there may be the maternal characteristics which affect both smoking and low birth weight. Because the calculations that we just did are not dependent on any information about the confounder, we can also use instrument variable approach to control for any measured, unmeasured, unknown confounders. So this is the advantage over other options. Drawback is in case where instrumental variable and exposure are weakly correlated, the estimated effect of the exposure on the outcome will be biased. Moreover, the use of linear regression is also constrained by assumptions, especially linearity and constant variance of the residuals. Now a little bit about residual confounding. So residual confounding is confounding that persists despite efforts to control or adjust for confounding. There are several causes for residual confounding. These are the causes. One is unknown confounders. The other is failure to collect data on possible confounders, inaccurate data on a confounder, use of broad categories of confounder in the analysis. Then let us see Python code for control of confounding. So this case study I have taken from this article. So here they describe the association of H. pylori with dyspepsia, and they have seen the confounding effect of weight of individuals. So they have two subgroups. One is normal weight individuals, the other are overweight individuals. So let us calculate using Python various statistics. So first is the odds ratio. So we have taken this library. We have defined this table. So this table 50, 500, 60, 380. This is the explanation, and this I have taken actually from this first overall group, that is all the individuals 50, 500, 60, 380. And then we have calculated the odds ratio using these codes. So the odds ratio or the crude odds ratio is 0.63 with this confidence interval. So let us see the adjusted odds ratio or the Mantel-Hansel odds ratio. So we have taken the data set of this example. Now this is our overall table. This is in order, that is 50, 500, 60, 380. And this is the subgroup, that is the normal weight subgroup. This is the contingency table of normal weight subgroup. This is the contingency table for overweight subgroup. And this is how we calculate the adjusted odds ratio. And the adjusted odds ratio is 1.16. Now let us see using the regression method. So for regression method, we have used the library sklearn or scikit library. Then this is our database. These are the normal weight and overweight groups. And this is the code for logistic regression. And we have here we have the odds ratio of 1.12. So this is nothing but the adjusted odd ratio here. So this is all for today. Thank you very much.